Hi, welcome back, and we are doing blocking in values with gloss glazing liquid. And this is what I was talking about in the last video, about creating a value scale with your paints, going from lightest to darkest. So it looks like I just kind of like, it looks pretty good actually. I'm just gonna leave it at that. All right, so the next step that I'm going to do is, since we have our darkest values already put in, now we have to create a gradient from light to dark, so transitioning from our darkest to our lightest. And I don't know if you noticed, I kind of went over my darkest value on the forehead on purpose, and the reason why I did that is because even though I was using my darkest value mixed, it wasn't as dark as my black. So by creating a gradient up to that line that I drew, which is her hairline, it made it fade in to the original, or the painting I did in the last video. It looks like it blends better, but you're still able to see that darker value popping through. You can still even see your transfer lines a little bit as well. And at this point in time, you're not going to want everything, you're not going to want to spend too much time trying to make everything perfect. At this moment in time, you kind of just want to pat in your areas of lightness and darkness and not worry too much if it's blending perfectly. And the reason why is because we're creating so many layers on top of this, transparent layers. Those lines that you're getting in from like going from one light, maybe a little bit darker, and then to your darkest, those lines that kind of are created by just patting your paint in will soften out throughout the process. So at this moment in time, don't worry too much about everything looking smooth or perfect, or it's not looking real. All you need to really do is just get it in and focus on where the light is making parts of the face come forward, or parts of the face or neck move backwards. So as a quick review, brighter light, white light, so your white paint will give the illusion that something is coming forward. So we're thinking of it as a highlight. And the dark paint will give the illusion that something is receding or going back. And similar to this tip is that warm colored paints, your yellows, reds, oranges, whatever, will appear to move forward, and your cool colors will appear to move backward. And details appear to move forward, and blurriness appears to move backwards. So those are things that you can use, that if you know about, you can use to kind of play with your portraits, and how you give the illusion of something appearing three-dimensional on a two-dimensional piece of paper. At the moment, I am using a round brush. A round brush just kind of comes to a point. You can almost think of it as kind of like a marker that you can blend pretty well. And I get a lot of control using a round brush because not a lot of paint is being put down to the surface because it's coming to a point. A filbert brush, because it is flat, kind of looks like this. It's flat, but it is rounded at the top. You're going to get more let's see here. You can get more paint on the surface because it's wider, as opposed to a round brush coming to a point like this, and you're going to have more detail. I like to use a rounder brush for a round brush for detailed areas, detailed sections, things where I need to have a lot of control over where my paint goes. And even though it does have more detail, you can tell at the moment I'm still using the patting method to kind of blend the paint into the previous layer underneath it. And I'm just kind of cleaning up any shadows that don't look like my reference photo. It is a little bit early for me to be doing this, to be honest. Like, I'm kind of refining a little bit too early, and that's a guilty habit of mine because I enjoy refining and things looking detailed right off the bat, and that's not what you should be spending your time on. And here's the reason why. you've mixed your paints, and this is not oil, this is acrylic, so it's going to dry pretty quickly. If you're spending too much time with your mixed paints on one specific area and your palette dries up and you haven't gotten your first layer down, you're gonna have to remix all of your paints again. Now, fortunately, we're in grayscale right now, so it doesn't really matter, but what would happen if you mixed up your like perfect color for your portrait, for your painting, and then you're like, oh, I love this color, I'm just gonna spend some time, and you get really focused on that. Later on, everything is dried and you cannot figure out how to remix that paint the exact right color. So word of advice is to kind of get, when you mix your paint up, just get everything in and worry about the details at the very end when everything has been shaped and formed, almost like a piece of clay that you've molded to appear as though it's in the light and parts of it are not in the light. And at that point in time, like once you have your sculpture and your values blocked in, then you can spend more time on the details, and that doesn't come until your final layer. So what should I have done instead? I think at this moment in time, I think it's good that I'm working on the lips, because that is something that I want to kind of the style that I have at the moment. All right, so here's another thing. You're not the same person painting the next day as you are right now when you're painting. It could be you're overtired. It could be got into a fight with a coworker or whatever. These things are going to change the way you paint. So if you're feeling like you're on, my biggest tip for you is to just like work, you know, put on a good audiobook, listen to a good story that's going to make you like focus a little bit longer. And because you can't predict what's going to happen the next day and how your mood or how everything is going to impact your painting style the next day. Sometimes we just see the reference photo a little bit different than other days too. Maybe we're just more in tune to details as opposed to something else. I mean, I think we all can understand how this feels, right? It's not easy to predict how you're going to feel in the future, though. I'm not suggesting staying up really late, though, and then being kind of like a horrible painter the next day because you stayed up too late. That's not what I'm trying to tell you. I'm just saying, come up with a plan, maybe a schedule. And if the schedule is working, then make sure you finish all the way until the end of the time that you set aside for your painting session. There is something that I'm using at the moment called a blender brush. I think this is. There we go. Did you see that mop brush? So the mop brush is kind of fluffy at the ends. The blender brush is fluffy, but it kind of comes more to a point. Those can be used for painting to lay in really soft layers of paint, or you can use it as like the second brush that you keep in your other hand, that your non-painting hand. And how I would use that is I keep my blending brushes, I keep my mop brushes, the ones that are very soft at the top, ready to go for after I put a little bit of a wet layer of paint on. And I need to soften it out right away because I want something to look very smooth. So what I'll do is take my painting hand, lay the paint in, and while it's still very wet and hasn't even come close to drying, and what I'll do is take my blender brush and just blend it out, rub it into the background, and then let it go and wait till it dries before you apply a second layer. And I'm trying to get a lot of information in these classes that will help you. But again, all this, if you want more information on painting portraits specifically, I highly recommend taking my portrait painting class. And that is because I go through 6 portraits, different age groups, different tonal value of skin tones. And it will help you kind of figure out if you're having problems painting your portraits. Plug. Just real shameless plug. But if you don't have the money for that at the moment, what I'm trying to do also is just try to get as much information as possible to you, so when it comes time for painting, you don't feel lost. All right, so here is a mistake my first mistake. What I was just talking about. If you apply, okay, I stopped. That means we're coming up to the end. But my first mistake there, and I'll try to get in very quickly, was I was starting to pull up paint. And that is because I didn't wait long enough for the paint underneath to dry before applying a new layer. So essentially what I was doing was, it was still wet underneath, and I pulled up the paint off of it on top. Okay, let's move on to our next video. I will see you there.